The House will come to order. Prayer by the chaplain.
In Proverbs, it says, Mavet v'chaim b'yad lashon. Death and life are in the power of the tongue. Free speech is our constitutional right. How we believe and how we say what we believe is our choice and reflects our hearts. As Proverbs tells us, from the beginning of time, we have known the power of our words, and how we say those words can be destructive, and it can, if we choose, be restorative. Today we are a divided nation, and that division is stoked by the use and misuse of our words, trampling on the diversity of our world. Disagreement is at the heart of democracy. However, using provocative words, tweets, Snapchatting, emailing, texting, disturbing words does not add to the civil discourse that we are proud of in this country and proud in this great state of Minnesota. Let us watch our words, the tone and volume with which we communicate. May this campaign against the assault of words begin here in this chamber with all of you who lead the people of Minnesota and are models for decency, fairness, to communicate and work for a just society. Thank you for your service to this state. Thank you for choosing your words wisely. As we are surrounded by the restoration work in this chamber and throughout the Capitol, may we restore civility, especially in the midst of disagreement. Yihiyu l'ratzon imrei fi v'hegion libi lifanecha, Adonai tzuri v'goali. May the words of our mouths and the meditations of our hearts be acceptable and restorative and peacemaking, and may they be our rock and our shield to a better tomorrow. Amen.
The chaplain for today is Rabbi Marcia Zimmerman from Temple, Israel, Minneapolis, Minnesota. Pledge of Allegiance. Please remain standing and recite the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America. The clerk will take the roll. The clerk will close the roll. Quorum is present. The clerk will read the journal of the preceding day.
Journal of the House, 90th Session, 2017, 13th day, St. Paul, Minnesota, Monday, February 6, 2017.
If there is no objection, further reading of the journal will be dispensed with, and the journal will be approved as corrected by the chief clerk. Hearing no objection, the journal is approved as corrected by the chief clerk. Members, we have two former members of the House of Representatives joining us today. First, I'd like to recognize a member who served from St. Joseph, Minnesota from 1993 to 2002, former Representative Steve Daler. Please welcome him. And next, the next member served from Princeton, Minnesota, served from 1991 to 1997. He was actually my representative at that time. He also served as Public Utilities Commissioner for 10.5 years and the chair of the Public Utilities Commission for 7 years. Please join me in welcoming former Representative Leroy Kopendreyer. Reports of standing committees and divisions. A copy of this order of business has been placed on each member's desk. If there's no objection, the reports will be adopted. Hearing no objection, the reports are adopted. Second reading of House files.
Second reading, House File number 444.
Second reading.
Second reading, House File number 697.
Second reading. Introduction of bills. The following House files have been offered for introduction today. The Chief Clerk will report the House files and give them their first reading.
Introduction and first reading of House Files 894 through 1066.
First reading, House files 894 through 1066. The member from Ramsey, Representative Hausman. For what purpose do you rise?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. I don't know if any of you have had the opportunity to go to the third floor of this wonderful new Capitol since the renovation, but I want to call special attention to that floor. One of the key elements of the new public space is the hosting of more diverse Minnesota stories. We've brought in several exhibits that add to the diversity of art on display in the Capitol, and we invite you to visit all the exhibits. They are in conference rooms. I'm told those conference rooms stay open, they're unlocked, and in the corridors. But the one I want to specifically bring your attention to today is the newest exhibit called Seeds of Change, featuring photographs by Mike Hazard, and brought to the Capitol in partnership with the Minnesota Museum of American Art and the Hmong American Farmers Association. And the brief description that they give of Seeds of Change is that this exhibit of photographs created by multimedia artist Mike Hazard documents a year in the life of a farm run by the Hmong American Farmers Association in Vermilion Township. Some of you may know where it is. Hazard's photographs highlight the rich culture and heritage of our state's Hmong community and the fruits of their efforts to cultivate success among first, second, and third generation American immigrants. I hope all of you are able to go see that as well as the others on the third floor. Thank you.
Report from the Committee on Rules and Legislative Administration.
Pepin from the Committee on Rules and Legislative Administration, pursuant to Rules 1.21 and 3.33, designates the following bills to be placed on the calendar for today for Thursday, February 9th, 2017, and establishes a pre-filing requirement for amendments offered to the following bills. House File numbers 113, 234, and 235.
The member from Goodhue, Representative Haley, for what purpose do you rise?
Point of personal privilege, Mr. Speaker.
State your point of personal privilege.
I'd like the chamber to be aware that my hometown and the district that I represent, Red Wing, Minnesota, has been named one of 5 national finalists for the Deluxe Small Business Revolution. What this means is that we are in the running for $500,000 for downtown renovation and support for our Main Street businesses. This is not only an honor for Red Wing, but I think for all small towns and businesses in our great state of Minnesota, and all of you are welcome to vote and encourage your constituents to vote. The voting lasts for the next week. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
So you're saying you don't need LGA this year?
Yep, calendar.
Calendar for the day. The first bill on the calendar for the day is House File 113. The clerk will report the bill.
House File number 113, number 1 on the calendar for the day, an act relating to energy, the first engrossment.
Recognize the member from Sherburne, Representative Newberger, to introduce the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. Before I start here, I'd like to send out a special thank you to all of the men and women who have worked very, very hard over the years at our power plants, especially our baseload power plants. There's been a very uncertain time for them, and you have a voice here in the legislature, and we are listening to you, and your jobs and your families matter to us. I'd like to thank you for all you do, because you truly power Minnesota. I'd like to talk today, members, about the Sherco Power Plant. It's in Becker, Minnesota, Sherburne County. It provides 2,400 megawatts of reliable baseload power, 7 days a week, 24 hours a day, 365 days out of the year. Sherco provides 350 full-time feed-your-family jobs. During the maintenance cycles, it provides up to 800 jobs. Each one of these jobs is attached to service industry jobs, and the estimate there is 4,000 related service industry jobs. Sherco is the largest property taxpayer in the city of Becker and in Sherburne County. Sherco provides over $4.5 million in local property taxes, and this equates to over 70% of the local tax burden. Recently, there was a decision to close 2 of the 3 units located within Sherco. These units will be closed starting in 2023 and then in 2025. The closing of these 2 units will cost Minnesota, central Minnesota, 150 full-time feed-your-family jobs. Last fall, the Public Utilities Commission approved the shutdown of Units 1 and 2. The Public Utilities Commission also agreed with Xcel Energy that there would be a need to replace these 2 units, the power that they generate. And they agreed, members, that a gas plant would be the best option. And they also agreed that it would need about 750 to 780 megawatts of power generation. The PUC approved the expansion of renewable energy, solar and wind. And they agreed that we needed a gas plant, but they would not approve the construction of a new gas plant. What they decided to do was to wait and to study the issue. Members, when a government entity says that they're going to wait to study an issue, that causes even more uncertainty and more fear amongst the people whose livelihoods are dependent on that industry. The site that we would like to put the gas plant on is right where the current Sherco power plant is. This site has already been approved decades ago for power generation. There would be no new permitting for that. The site also contains hundreds of millions of dollars of power transmission infrastructure. If we don't put the plant in Becker, the cost of putting it somewhere else would be prohibitive. That 2 the PUC agreed on. While the PUC decided, the Public Utilities Commission decided that they would wait, that they did not want to give the permission to build this new plant, I don't agree with that decision, members, and nor do the people in my district. I believe that the economic impact to central Minnesota was not taken into full consideration. Members, it's the legislature's job to create policy. It's the Public Utility Commission's job to implement that policy. I believe that that line has been blurred. Now, Minnesota needs new power plants. We are going to be facing a new energy crisis in about a decade, an energy generation crisis. We're losing 2 of our 3 units at Sherco. We're losing the Monticello nuclear plant will expire its license in 2030, and Prairie Island's license will be expiring shortly thereafter. The time to make a decision to build power generation is now, because building power plants is a complex and long process. My first choice, as many of you know, to replace the missing or the 2 units that we're losing, 1 and 2, my first choice, members, is to build new coal generation. I support coal for many reasons. But in this current political climate, this is not an option for us. The second choice, members, would be to put in a new nuclear plant. But currently that's not an option either due to the political climate that we're facing. So our final option, members, is to put in a gas plant, which is desperately needed, and we're going to need this. Members, House File 113 will allow us to do this. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I will stand for questions.
There is an amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Thiessen moves to amend House File number 113, the first engrossment, and the amendment is coded A4.
Recognize the member from Hennepin, Representative Thiessen, to introduce your amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So I just want to start by saying that I do think that moving from a coal plant to a natural gas plant would be an improvement. I think that there are other options we should be considering as well. But the first thing I think is important, at least for me, is that that's a step in the right direction. Really what this amendment gets to, though, is the process and the precedent that we're setting with this bill. We have never, in the history of at least as long as we've had the PUC, completely waived any review by the PUC of a project that would also otherwise need a certificate of need. There's been some reference to other proceedings where there have been exceptions made to the certificate of need process, but in each of those cases, there has been a very specific alternative process that the PUC went through to make sure that the process met the public interest and protected ratepayers. And so all this amendment does is it does not require a 14 or 12-step certificate of need process, which is our current statute. It's putting in place instead an expedited process that has only 3 things that the PUC would look at, and it would be done in 6 months. It puts a deadline on the PUC to act. And the 3 things that it looks at is the public interest, which I think we all want to make sure that any of these decisions is in alignment with. And then 2 other things. One is this the least cost alternative? And is it the size of the plant that we need in order to meet the necessary deficit? You know, when you take the coal plant away, you need to back it up with something else. So it looks, is this the least cost alternative? And I think all of us in this room can agree, especially if you're an XL ratepayer or a ratepayer in the state of Minnesota, that we want someone looking out to make sure that we're not building a plant that's going to cost you, a ratepayer, more money. This is the amendment we should adopt to make sure we're protecting ratepayers, to make sure we're protecting our constituents, and we're going to put in place the most cost-effective replacement source for this energy. So that's the second thing that the PUC would look at. And the third thing is to make sure that this process is going to, in fact, enhance the reliability of our electric transmission and distribution system in Minnesota. One of the things I hear a lot of concern with by folks that are concerned about renewables is the reliability that goes along with this. And in this PUC review process, we're going to balance out the cost effectiveness and the reliability of the system. It's a very straightforward amendment. It's a short process. You know, this plant is not going to be built, folks, till 2024, if I'm not mistaken. This would say once the Xcel files its papers, the PUC has to be done in 6 months. So we're going to have a 7-8 year lead time, even under this process, to get it done. I just think this is good government. I think this is a way to protect ratepayers, to protect our constituents, to make sure that the utility, which is a monopoly and can do it without whatever it wants if we don't provide some protection, is doing the right thing for our constituents. And I would ask your support, Mr. Speaker. I'd also ask for a roll call. Thank you.
Roll call has been requested. Seeing 15 hands, there will be a roll call. Discussion on the A4 amendment. The member from Sherburne, Representative Newberger.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, Representative Thiessen. I appreciate your concerns, and I understand, I think, where your heart is on this. As I look through on the first two portions of that with the date, that's really not something that I'm getting any heartburn over. But when I get into the meat of your amendment here, if you look at 1.14, it says that the public utility has demonstrated to the Commission's satisfaction. And what that does, in essence, members and Representative Thiessen, is that this basically puts the whole thing right back into the lap of the PUC. And although that you're saying that this would be done in 6 months, I think that's optimistic at best. And Representative Thiessen, when you talk about this has not been done, and talking about a certificate of need, Representative Thiessen, I'm a little bit confused there. We have a 30% renewable power mandate that does not require a certificate of need. We have a lot of solar expansion. We have solar projects that are in the hopper that are lined up waiting to be done, but none of those required a certificate of need. We have biomass power generation that's been mandated by legislative action that does not require a certificate of need. And also, Mr. Thiessen and Representative Thiessen and Mr. Speaker, we've had 3 coal plants that were converted to gas here in the metro area in the last decade. They would be High Bridge, Riverside, and Black Dog. If you're talking about the cost that was involved with those, the highest megawatt plant was the High Bridge plant, and the rate impact was about $1 a month, $1.18 a month when that went through. Representative Thiessen, Mr. Speaker, I come from a district with thousands of Xcel Energy ratepayers. I am an Xcel Energy ratepayer. I have had no communication, no phone calls, no letters, no emails from folks in my district with this concern. This is going to go before, in 2019, this is going to be presented before the PUC, and then again before they build it within 20 months, and a rate case will be determined so that we do have the ratepayers in mind. This is not a blank check to Xcel Energy. My bill has some pretty good constraints there, and I'm confident that we can get this gas plant built and that we can make up with the power shortage that we're going to have. Members, it's real simple. If you want to have renewable energy, if you want to have solar, and if you want to have wind, and for the record, and I've said this before, I'll say it again, I am not against solar and I'm not against wind energy. They're excellent sources of supplemental power, but it's like an airplane. You have to have 2 wings, and you cannot have solar and you cannot have wind unless you have gas, because the sun doesn't always shine and the wind doesn't always blow, and we do not have the power storage technologies that will make up for that difference at this time. That is, at best, decades away. Decades away. I was in Washington, D.C. last year at an energy conference. I've been to the Lehigh Institute, as some of the members on the other side of the aisle have as well, and I've done other conferences with CSG and NCSL, And we have talked about energy storage time and time again, and the best answer that we could get is that this is at a minimum a decade away for energy storage, which in and of itself has its own environmental concerns. So Representative Thiessen, I do appreciate your heart and where I think you're trying to go in this, but what this essentially does is it puts it right back into the lap of the PUC, and this is why we have House File 13 in the first place. Members, I would advise a no vote on this. Thank you.
Further discussion on the A4 amendment. The member from Hennepin, Representative Wagenius.
Well, thank you, Representative Newberger. There will be a gas plant at Becker. I don't think there's any question about that. But what House File 113 does, it demands that XL build a supersized gas plant, which means that XL customers, these are my constituents and yours, will pay a supersized bill. This amendment makes sure that the plant will be right-sized so that ratepayers will pay a right-sized bill, and it will be fair and reasonable. I urge a yes vote.
Further discussion. The member from Hennepin, Representative Thiessen.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Just briefly, and again, I think what Representative Wagenius said is correct. There is going to be a gas plant at that site. It really comes down to the size and whether we're going to have other pieces. And I don't disagree with you, Representative Newberger, about the need for reliability as well as moving towards renewable energy, which is why we crafted this amendment the way that we did, to make sure we looked at those two key components. But I do think that there's a difference between a certificate of need process that is very extended, at least 1 to 2 years, if not longer, that looks at least a dozen items within the PUC's purview, and what I'm proposing here, which is specifically said it has to be done in 6 months, and it only can look at those 3 particular things. So I would again just encourage people, and I guess just to respond, there is a difference between a 700 plus megawatt power plant that's being built and a 10 kilowatt or 40 kilowatt solar installation, right? In terms of the review that we should be doing. And these are being built by public utilities that are monopolies, which is in some cases different than the renewable things that we're talking about otherwise. That's why we have a certificate of need process. And each of those 3 cases of the conversions that you talked about, the High Bridge and the Black Dog, and I am blanking on the other one right now, they were exempted from the certificate of need process, but there was another much more extensive process than I'm proposing here, process in place that they had to go through. And so I think that we are setting some dangerous precedent moving forward here by simply waving away any review of these processes. And I guess the last thing that just comes to mind as I'm thinking about this is I remember we had a debate in 2015 on whether climate change was real or not. And I don't want to get into that debate, believe me. But the response I heard over and over again to that amendment was that we're not scientists. We don't know how to make these decisions. We don't know if climate change is real because we're not the experts on that issue. I would submit the same thing is exactly true here. We're not the experts here on what the right size power plant and what the right mix of energy and the mix of energy that's most going to protect our taxpayers, our ratepayers, our constituents is going to be. That is the PUC and all the experts that testify in these proceedings. So members, I would submit that this is a pretty common sense way to go, and I would encourage your support. Thank you.
Seeing no further discussion, the clerk will take the roll on the amendment. Clerk will close the roll. Mariani votes aye. There being 58 ayes and 69 nays, the motion does not prevail and the amendment is not adopted. There are no further amendments at the desk. The clerk will give the bill its third reading.
Third reading, House File Number 113.
Third reading. Further discussion on House File 113. The member from Hennepin, Representative Wagenius.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Let's just cut to the chase here. This bill isn't about whether there's going to be a gas plant at Becker. There's going to be a gas plant at Becker. The question here is whether the plant will be so supersized that ratepayers will be taken to the cleaners. This bill is all about electric rates, how much XL customers are going to pay for their electricity. Are XL customers going to have to pay a higher rate than they should because a monopoly has come to the legislature and asked for a green light? All of my constituents, and some of yours, are in the XL service area. So part of my interest right now is to make sure my customers and yours aren't paying too much. So in the January 11th, 17 order, and that was the conclusion of a resource planning process and not a certificate of need, the PUC said that its job was to keep the customer's bill and the utility rates as low as practicable. That's in page 3 in the order. I did not hand out the order, members, but I did send it to you all. It's more paper than you probably wanted on your desk, but you can follow it. The PUC also said that they doubted the usefulness of XL's projections that were more than 5 years in the future. That was on page 6. So the PUC said that while there might be a need for an additional resources in the 2025-2030 time frame, it was the likely need for 750 megawatts. And it concluded that it was just too early to make the decision. That's too far off. But note the 750 megawatts number that the PUC said, because this bill asks for 786. And that is a supersized plant. The PUC also said in its order that XL had actually agreed to file for a certificate of need. That was on page 10. So there is a place for natural gas, and the questions here are size, who should make the decision, and is this the time or is it too early? And XL doesn't want the PUC to answer that question on timing or in size. It's coming here and asking for the green light. XL wants to lock in the highest cost option by building the biggest plant it can. And with that, it will lock in the biggest cost to ratepayers and the biggest dividend to shareholders. So let me just talk about the estimates of the cost of this plant. It's about $800 million, and that's what XL said on the record. XL did not tell us what the cost of the pipeline would be to get to the plant, but now we know it's going to be about 100 miles for a pipeline to get that much capacity of gas. It will, because it's so long, and it will go into an area where the soils are very sandy, that will mean, obviously you can do it, but it's going to be a higher cost. So the estimate of $200 million for a pipeline is probably on the low side. But there's another issue, and that's the fuel costs. The experts who deal with fuel costs, say that the cost of natural gas will go up about 2.5% a year over the life of this plant. That's compounded. That's a 30 to 40 years because that's how long this plant will last. And so what that means, when you look at the amount of gas this plant will take, $52 million a year worth of gas to run the plant. That's not gas that's coming from Minnesota. That's $52 million a year that's leaving Minnesota and creating jobs in some other state. So as bad as that is, the Section C of the bill makes the bill worse. Xcel is asking for, and in this bill, an independent evaluator to figure out what the cost of this plant might be. And that then will be the number submitted to the PUC for rate making. But Xcel says if I can come under that number, I'm going to get a bonus. And of course, who pays for the bonus but the ratepayers? So here we are in a situation where Republicans have been adamantly opposed to a gas tax that buys roads and bridges, something we all share in common. But here we have the equivalent of a gas tax. I think Chair David saying a fee is a tax and a tax is a fee. And what the Republicans are doing, what you're doing, Representative Newberger, is proposing the biggest tax base possible, a larger tax than may be needed. So Xcel gets the biggest fee, biggest tax possible to give to shareholders. My constituents and many of yours don't like a gas tax increase, but they are willing to pay because they know they're going to get something, roads and bridges, for it. However, none of my constituents, Republican, Democrat, Independent, have little or any tolerance for what they see as corporate welfare. They're going to be super angry to find that this bill says that they may have to pay a higher tax than is necessary. So, in summary, a triple win for Xcel. They get to choose the size of the plant. They can supersize it. It will lock in the supersized plant for 30 to 40 years. And Xcel will get a bonus for itself. This is a triple loss for ratepayers, something that not one of us who is an Xcel ratepayer should vote for. On behalf of my constituents, I'm voting no.
The member from Ramsey, Representative Hausman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. I want to just underscore one of the points that Representative Wagenius made. Headline writers sometimes capture the heart of something. So the business section of the Star Tribune, the headline was, PUC is being cut out of the process. Another headline, Minnesota law would set precedent for unregulated monopolies. I heard the author say in his introduction that the legislature sets policy and the PUC implements policy. I have always seen that differently. I have always seen that the PUC protects the energy consumer from high costs, the energy consumer who pays the bills. The PUC protects us from high energy costs by all of the careful analysis they make. That was one of the points you made earlier, Representative Wagenius made early in her remarks, and I think it does get to the heart of what the consumer is going to see about the passage of this bill. Thank you.
The member from Hennepin, Representative Hornstein.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. I want to echo the comments of my colleagues, Representative Wagenius and Representative Hausman. You know, members, when we start chipping away at this PUC process that was set up over history to create a process for fair and reasonable rate setting to benefit our constituents, the utility customers, we really start going down a dangerous path. And so I did a little bit of research on the history of the PUC, and I think you'll find it very interesting and instructive. 13 years after statehood, in 1871, this state legislature, our predecessors, were very concerned about another unregulated, monopolistic industry, the railroad industry. And so they set up a railroad and warehouse commission that did the following. And it was really active, particularly from 1871 to 1905. And what the legislative reference librarian tells us is that the state gradually created the Railroad and Warehouse Commission and increased its powers from limited inspection of railways to establishing rates for railroads, regulating warehouse and grain handling, investigating carrier management, determining reasonable rates. Let me underscore that point, determining reasonable rates, and ordering railroad companies to maintain safety devices and prosecuting cases. So again, why was this set up? Because it was in the interest of the populace to have some kind of safeguard, some kind of stopgap on these monopolistic railroad practices. And so now we can fast forward to the mission statement of our modern PUC. This commission actually was empowered until 1967, and then it became the Public Service Commission and eventually the Public Utilities Commission. So the mission statement of the Public Utilities Commission is to create and maintain a regulatory environment that ensures safe, reliable, efficient utility services at fair and reasonable rates. Again, that statement that we heard in 1871 appears in 2016, reasonable rates. And so, members, Representative Wagenius had passed out a letter from a coalition of faith organizations, and there's one sentence of it that I underlined that I hope you read and take to heart. We do not believe that monopolies that provide public goods should be able to bypass this regulatory process. And so, members, when we start to chip away at this long-established agency, commission, that's been set up over 100 years ago, then we really truly go down a dangerous path. And that is why when we prescribe this kind of legislation, when we do the prescribing, as Representative Thiessen said, when we have experts that can do this at the PUC, that have set up a long and effective process, long ago process to address these issues, this is not the role for the legislature. So this bill is neither fair nor reasonable, and I hope you will join me in voting no.
The member from Rice, Representative Bly.
Thank you, Speaker. I just wanted to mention that I also live in a district that is served, at least the city of Northfield is served by Excel, and I have heard nothing but opposition to this bill. My Excel ratepayers are very concerned about the kinds of things that Representative Hornstein and Representative Wagenius and Representative Hausman have mentioned. And oftentimes we have conversations about regulatory bodies or regulations and mostly hear negative things about them, but in many ways these commissions are part of our democratic system, and they assure that democracy can happen. And so I'm disturbed that we're closing out the PUC from being a part of this, and would also encourage a no vote on the bill.
Recognize the member from Hennepin, Representative Davney.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I won't ask anyone specific to yield for a question, but there used to be a GOP House member who always said, my constituents like it when I'm able to tell them what the process is, how we arrived at a decision, or how the formula works for something. Because then they know that the process was fair. I can say, as in this case, Excel comes to the Public Utility Commission. Here's who's on the Public Utilities Commission. Here's who selects them and how they're selected. Here's the criteria that Excel needs to meet in their submission. Here's the process that the Utility Commission uses to make that decision. Here's where you, as a constituent, or in this case as an Excel ratepayer, can have a voice. And then here's the outcome. I can defend that to my constituents, this GOP legislator used to say. And I find that experience with my with my constituents as well. Here's the process. Here's how you can have a voice. Here's what the outcome was based on this criteria. What my constituents don't like is when they know there's a process and because of who knows who, because of who's able to come here and work the hallways, because of all that sometimes not so pretty political stuff, they get a pass. They get a hall pass on the process that protects my constituents as ratepayers, that protects my constituents as people who breathe air each and every day, that protects my constituents because they can have confidence in the process. Our job is to set up the process, make sure it's fair, and then respect the outcome of the people smarter than us on these issues. House File 113 fails our constituents on trust, on process, and on outcome. Members, I'll be a no vote. I would urge you to be as well. Thank you.
Any further discussion on the bill? The member from Sherburne, Representative Newberger.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, members, for your spirited debate. A few things I want to touch on briefly. Number one, stereotypes been thrown out there. You're trying to paint this picture. It's some big, massive, gigantic plant, 786 megawatts. Members, recently a gas peaker was built in Trimont, Minnesota. That was 550 megawatts, and that's considered relatively small as a peaker. So if you're going to paint a picture and try to categorize this as some big gas giant, I don't think that's accurate. Also, there's been a lot of spirited debate, members, about this has not been vetted properly. Members, this has been before the PUC for several days, 18,000 pages of documents relating to this, hearing after hearing after hearing. This has been ground through the process at the PUC, and again, their decision was they agreed this needed to happen, but they wouldn't take that extra step. It's like always being engaged and never being married. Sooner or later, that just doesn't work. Also, there's been a lot of beating up on Xcel Energy. Members, I would like to just say on their behalf, Xcel Energy is not some big foreign conglomerate that's come in here to Minnesota to raid our energy industry. Xcel Energy has been here for over 100 years. Their corporate headquarters is right here in the metro. It's in Minneapolis. They've invested over $300 million in Minnesota. They have over 6,000 employees. Many of those jobs are really good trade union jobs, and these people are important. They've also invested over $74 million in minority and women business development. So members, if we're going to try to stereotype Xcel Energy as being some big evil corporate giant, then you should probably look at the entire picture as you move forward in your decision-making process. Members, again, I would appreciate a green vote. Please vote yes on this. And once again, I would like to say to everyone at the Sherco Power Plant, thank you for all of your hard work during this very uncertain time.
Seeing no further discussion, the clerk will take the roll on the bill. The clerk will close the roll. There being 77 ayes and 51 nays, the bill is passed and its title agreed to. The next bill on the calendar for the day is House File 234. The clerk will report the bill.
House File number 234, number 2 on the calendar for the day, an act relating to energy.
Recognize the member from Candy Ojai, Representative Baker, to introduce your bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. I'm proud today to bring House File 234 to the House floor for passage today. This is a rural electric bill that is their #1 goal to make sure we get passed this year. Folks, we've got 45 rural co-ops around Minnesota, and their job is to make sure that we all have affordable and reliable power in our most rural communities in Minnesota. What we need to do today is to appreciate and understand the work that they do, and to give these boards that work very hard to make sure that those grids and rates stay reliable and stay affordable. But we need to make sure we give them the power they need and the strength they need to make decisions that are best for our communities. What House File 234 does, members, is it clarifies some language and it provides more certainty for local co-ops. Again, these are member-owned, locally elected officials that sit on these local boards. 2 years ago, when this body passed what was kind of known as the net metering bill, passed by Chair Garofalo, which recognized the need for solar and the importance of our solar on our grid, but made sure that our local co-ops and our munis had the ability to put either a small charge on each bill with solar to make sure that those grid and the transmission and the backbone of those operations were maintained fair to more people. So it was a good bill signed by the governor. I'm very proud to have worked on that bill as well. What this does, members, is it provides more clarity so when local boards make decisions, that those boards make those decisions and it stays local. Right now, we've got a couple of dockets or complaints that have been filed with the PUC by members that are attesting to a small monthly fee on their bill. An example might be in Meeker County, my neighboring county next to Candy Ojai County. Their co-op is instilled a $5.88 charge on a monthly bill to help support their backbone of their community, of a solar company, of a solar owner, the investor in that membership territory. They brought that to the PUC. It'll cost that co-op, Meeker County Co-op, at least $40,000 to at least explain their point, the delays, and that $40,000, if that is the number, will go right back to the ratepayers in this small community. So, members, what I'm asking today is let's give our local boards the authority that they need to make those decisions based on what's right for those communities, to make sure that their voice is heard to their members. Again, these are locally elected folks. You go to church with them, you see them in the grocery store. I was on a commission, the Wilmer Municipal Utilities, for 7 years, and I appreciated having the support to know that our local communities supported our decisions. We are asking that this bill clean up that language so that the decisions are final at the board. If members now want to, the co-op members want to have a question to their board members, they simply go to their board members' meetings. They're welcome to do that. So members, we're trying to keep the decision local, let it stay at home, and I would appreciate a green vote on this very important legislation for our smallest and most rural of our electric co-ops. Thank you.
There is an amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Bly moves to amend House File Number 234, and the amendment is coded A8.
Recognize the member from Rice, Representative Bly, to introduce your amendment.
Thank you, Speaker, and members. So my amendment is, if we're going to do this, if we're going to remove the PUC from looking at these issues, we should make sure that the co-ops have all the information they can glean about the energy that they might purchase from some of their members. And my sense is that the costs are calculated, but not necessarily all the benefits. Some might argue that in spite of the added costs, the benefits of having solar energy within a co-op is not always counted into the equation. And further, there's an advantage, I think, as we look at the purchasing energy that is produced locally as opposed to far away, and building that capacity for producing energy locally is a good thing. And I think not only for the members of that co-op, but also for the community. I recently read an article, which I will try to send out the link to it in a little bit. I didn't make copies of it. I did have sent around a copy of some data that was gathered by the Minnesota Environmental Partnership, and hopefully you can look at that, about opinions about people who live in both urban and rural areas about net metering and utility regulation. But the article that I was interested in talked about a small Iowa town that has a co-op. I think it's Farmers Electric Co-op in Iowa, near the town of Kelowna, if you've heard of that community. And they heavily invested in solar energy and encouraged their members to get involved with solar energy, and are very proud of the fact that they are likely to meet a goal of having 25% of their energy produced by 2025. They use a slightly different method for encouraging development of solar energy, and that's a feed-in tariff, a policy that was really developed very strongly by Germany and helped them advance solar energy and wind energy in Germany, making them a leader in the world for solar and wind energy. I attempted it back in 2008 when this policy went in Iowa to make it possible for people to use a feed-in tariff here in Minnesota. Unfortunately, there was tremendous opposition from utilities and co-ops to make that happen. My point, I guess, is that my hope, and I've talked with the co-op in my own district about this, and they're to be commended for embracing some renewable energy and doing more than I think others may have done, which I'm proud of. But I think to look at the lowering costs of renewable energy and how in the future we're going to be looking at even cheaper energy being produced locally than is produced now. And what a benefit that would be, not only to ratepayers, but to the community as well, creating economic development and jobs within that community, which may actually increase the energy production and energy need and use, which benefits the co-op. I think also this kind of thinking is in line with the original idea of the co-ops in the first place, where they brought together their own members to advance and secure their energy. I think there's a lot to be said for energy security and having that locally produced, not traveling over great distances, and being produced by neighbors. And my hope, I guess, is that co-op members would think about the benefits, the plus side of having energy locally produced and not just the costs. And that's really the purpose of this amendment and what I hope to accomplish with asking for some information from the co-ops that they've looked at and considered these things. So thank you, and I'll take any questions. Oh, I'd like a roll call on the amendment, please.
Roll call has been requested. Seeing 15 hands, there will be a roll call. Discussion to the amendment. Representative Candy-Hoy, Representative Baker.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I appreciate Representative Bly bringing this bill forward. Again, this has really not a lot to do with our bill. It's a reporting. This is going back to some old litigation, I think, and going back to my co-ops, they do have the information to make good decisions based on their power purchases, their portfolio, the mixture of what they're buying, where they're buying it. So members, I would ask you for a red vote on the Bly amendment, please. Thank you.
Any further discussion? Further discussion? Seeing none, the clerk will take the roll on the amendment. Clerk will close the roll. There being 49 ayes, 77 nays, the amendment is not adopted. There's another amendment at the desk. Clerk will report the amendment.
Thiessen moves to amend House File Number 234 as follows, and the amendment is coded A9.
Representative Thiessen, there is also an amendment to the amendment. Would you prefer to take that one first?
I'd like to take the amendment to the amendment, Mr. Speaker. Thank you.
Clerk will report the amendment to the amendment.
Thiessen moves to amend his amendment to House File Number 234 as follows, and the amendment to the amendment is coded A12.
To your amendment, Representative Thiessen.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This is really kind of an author's amendment to get the amendment in the shape that I should have gotten it in initially. So if we could, if people would just support the amendment, and then we can talk about the overall amendment.
Any discussion to the amendment to the amendment? Representative Baker.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And again, I welcome Representative Thiessen to bring the A12 forward, the amendment to the A9. I would welcome that. So please support this.
Any further discussion? Any further discussion? All those in favor of the amendment to the amendment, please signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed? No. The amendment is adopted. We are on the Thiessen amendment as amended. Representative Thiessen.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So this amendment, as you know, a lot of this bill and the controversy around it relates to this grid access charge and the formula. And the electric co-ops have adopted a formula that all of the co-ops are going to use. Though it'll vary by co-op because of the inputs that go into it, but there is a general formula that they've all agreed to follow through with. And so what this amendment would do is really two things. One of the concerns, we've heard about is it eliminates a consumer remedy. This would require the co-ops to do mandatory independent mediation of any disputes that arise with their customers. Some co-ops are already doing this. Some actually have arbitration in their rules that they adopt as local co-ops. But this would require all co-ops to at least offer mandatory mediation with an independent outside person to bring the parties together and try to resolve any dispute that arises. And the second thing that this does is, one part of the bill is it eliminates an ongoing investigation of the PUC. And this amendment would reinstate or allow that investigation to go forward, but in a much more limited way. The purpose of it would be to determine if the formula for the grid access charges complies with the statute passed in 2015. If it does, then use of that formula will be okay, but I think it's important that we go through that process just so people feel comfortable that there's some sunlight and some discussion by an independent agency that this formula actually complies with the law. And secondly, if the PUC determines that it doesn't comply with the statute, it has to identify the things that it thinks doesn't comply with the statute. So it has to give the co-ops clear direction about what would be necessary to bring the methodology set forth in the formula into compliance with the statute. But it does not give the PUC the power to set the rates, and it is up to the co-ops as how to proceed from there. And so I think it addresses, not completely, I understand it, but it addresses some of the concerns that I've heard about this. I think it's a fair resolution, and I'd urge people's support.
Members, discussion to the amendment as amended. Representative Baker.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I have also visited with the folks that I've been working with hard on this bill. I appreciate Representative Thiessen's ability to take a very narrow approach and a very time-sensitive approach to give the methodology that the co-ops have worked very hard on to make sure that the rate structure that they have worked on with the interconnect charges and the fairness to it with the size of your solar panels and the size of the generation that you're doing back on the grid is done properly and fairly. So with the communication that I've had with my friends at the co-op, I can support the A9 amendment as amended from Representative Thiessen. I appreciate that. It does give a very narrow window of that opportunity for the PUC to look at how the methodology is done, and I appreciate the work of what the co-ops are doing, and they feel also confident this will be a workable solution and a good idea. So, Mr. Speaker, I would support this.
Any further discussion to the amendment? Representative Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members, and thank you, Representative Thiessen, and thank you, Representative Baker, for presenting the amendment and agreeing to it. It's just natural that disputes are going to arise, and the disputes, having the PUC being the resolution for the disputes has created a lot of problems and would create even more problems for our co-ops. And remembering our co-ops serve a distinct need out in the countryside, and it's a problem for them. And I just want to speak to the concept of mediation in here. I really think we've got to have a third party to resolve those disputes. It seems like a very fair way to do it, and I think it'll work well with the co-ops. And after all, let's remember, co-ops are cool.
Further discussion to the amendment as amended. Further discussion. Hearing none. All those in favor of adopting the amendment as amended, please signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed? No. Amendment as amended is adopted. There's another amendment at the desk. Clerk clerk will report the amendment.
Hansen moves to amend House File Number 234 as amended, and the amendment is coded A17-0042.
Chair recognizes Representative Hansen to speak to the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And when I had this drafted, I thought it might be the 42nd amendment, but I guess not. It's the third. Representative Baker, I listened very closely as you were presenting the bill, and you talked about the boards of the electric co-ops and the munis, and you talked about them as local elected officials. And I've participated in local elected official as in my electric co-op where my farm is. I've participated in elections where and voted for other co-ops as well. So I'm familiar with that process. If you look at the 0042 amendment, what it does is in Minnesota we have a lot of people who are identified as public officials, ranging from the executive director of the State Board of Investment, judge of workers' compensation courts, solicitor general, commissioners, deputy commissioners, or assistant commissioners of state agencies, director of the Division of Alcohol Gambling Enforcement, Higher Education Facilities Authority, supervisor for a soil and water conservation district, citizen member of the Lizard Sam's Outdoor Heritage Council. So as this bill is moving forward, you're providing, it seems, more authority, or at least clarifying, I think the word you used was clarifying decision-making and authority for the co-op boards and the municipalities. So with that authority on decision-making, my amendment would require that those members, those elected members, and I know as this has gone through, we've talked about democracy, those elected members of the boards of directors would become public officials. And as public officials, they'd have to complete the same economic interest qualifications, the reporting that we do, every one of us here has to do, and I don't think we've found that to be that onerous. It gives the people of Minnesota, or in that case, the ratepayers and the members of those cooperatives and municipalities, gives them an idea of the interests, the economic interests that those members would have. In addition, it makes them subject to the gift ban that we have and that everybody else on this list of public officials has to comply with. And I think that's a good thing. Some of you who've been here for a number of years know that some of these folks on the list that I voted and authored the legislation to put them on the list. Trying to make sure that the people who are making the decisions don't have a conflict. Transparency is the best disinfectant. Sunshine can help prevent problems in the future, and also making sure we don't have any the same requirements for accepting gifts that we as elected officials here have and the folks that are listed as public officials. So I would ask for your support.
Mr. Speaker.
Representative Nash, for what purpose do you rise?
Mr. Speaker, I rise under a point of order.
State your point of order.
Under Rule 3.2.1, this amendment is not germane to the bill, and I'm prepared to offer advice.
State your advice.
Mr. Speaker and members, the amendment that Representative Hansen's offering is under Chapter 10A. The bill itself is under Chapter 216. Clearly, it's not germane.
Any further advice? Representative Hansen.
Mr. Speaker and members, we tend to, my experience in the last few years is we tend to get very creative in terms of what is germane and what isn't germane. I would ask that members look at House File 234, where it's talking about municipal electric utility, and a cooperative electric association. Line 2.9, commission means a board of directors of a cooperative association elects by resolution to assume the authority. So it's an election. And if we go back to 10A, we're talking about public officials elected and appointed here. So I would hope that the speaker would uphold the amendment.
Any further advice? Members, after having studied the amendment, having reviewed the bill, and having received advice from both Representative Nash and Representative Hansen, I do find that the motion is well taken. Is there another amendment at the desk? That's it.
No more amendments at the desk. Clerk will give the bill its third reading.
If there's no more amendments at the desk, the clerk will give the bill its third reading.
Third reading, House File Number 234, as amended.
Discussion to the bill. Member from Blue Earth, Representative Considine.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Will the author yield for a question?
He will. Representative Considine.
Representative Baker, will this bill result in the members of the co-op losing their right to take their grievances to court?
Representative Baker.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And Representative Considine. No, it doesn't. It gives them still the right to file a ruling in court. They can take it through the AG's office, and that would be their next step. But that would be their next voice in that matter if they cannot resolve it within the current board structure.
Representative Considine. Member from Hennepin, Representative Wagenius.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Representative Baker, you've offered a solution to a problem without fully or clearly telling the body what the problem really is. And the problem isn't just some disputes between some members and their co-op. The problem is that some co-ops, and I don't want to do this blanket, but some co-ops have set fees that are so large that it discourages members from putting rooftop solar on, or for a small farmer to put on a windmill, put on a small windmill. And so that is what, so now there's this investigation. And let's talk about a little bit about what's really going on underneath here. And it is the investigation, and there is an amendment that's changed that a bit, but it's not solved the problem. So in the complaint to the PUC, and this is what's being investigated, the complaint asks the PUC to consider benefits and not just a cost when it's doing the methodology. So if there are benefits to the grid, the fixed cost will not be as much. So what the amendment does, it says that a ruling on the methodology can't be challenged. But it doesn't say that, and it couldn't say that a co-op actually applies it correctly. So now we're right back where we started, with a co-op not applying the methodology correctly. So now, okay, there's mediation. Well, let's assume for a minute that it doesn't work. If a customer thought the co-op was charging more than the law allowed, the customer would appeal to the co-op that set the fee in the first place. The co-op becomes a judge of itself. And worse, under this bill, in the last section where the co-ops assume the duties and responsibility of the PUC, it seems to me that a co-op can now say to a customer, you did that in bad faith, or that was a frivolous complaint. Then the co-op could say, if they're using the PUC rules, customer, you need to pay my legal fees. So what citizen could appeal under that circumstance? It would be far too risky. Some of you know that we have a farm in Douglas County. We're only there a couple of months in the summertime. Runestone Electric is our electricity provider. And our house is all electric, electric hot water heater, electric stove, just as it is in many places in outstate Minnesota. And I looked online to see what Runestone would charge if we were to put solar at the farm. Runestone doesn't charge a flat fee, but they charge an increasing fee as the bigger the array. So what I did was I looked at what we spend in, say, 4 months out of the year, or 3 months actually, and I projected ahead, and it looked to me like if we did solar at our farm, it would be $30 or $40 a month. And that's not all of it, because the co-op online tells us very directly that they can choose to change their fees at any time. So it's far too risky for us to even think about putting solar at the farm. I want you members to look at a letter in the packet that I sent out. It's from Mary Mueller, who has already built solar on her farm. And she said that after her co-op, McLeod Co-op, instituted the additional fees allowed under the law 2 years ago, no one else has built any solar or small wind in her co-op area. Representative Hausman sent out this letter, and I think it's an extraordinarily important letter. It's from folks who are solar installers. It's a whole list of them. Look at the back. But here is the clear sentence that we need to be talking about. It's the beginning of the 4th paragraph. And these are the installers who say, these unreasonable fees discourage solar investment in greater Minnesota. This bill sets up a major roadblock for wind and solar. Both hold great promise in greater Minnesota. My Minneapolis residents, my Richfield residents, can choose to put solar on their roof without any thought of an additional payment or increasing fees. With this bill, folks in outstate Minnesota will not have the same opportunity. I find it wholly ironic that you advertise yourself as providing more economic benefit to outstate Minnesota, and then bring this bill taking away economic opportunity. I'm a no vote.
The member from Dakota, Representative Hansen.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And would Representative Baker yield? I have a series of questions.
He will yield. Representative Hansen.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And Representative Baker, my questions kind of follow up a little bit on the decision-making authority and who makes decisions and the discussion about democracy. So on a municipal electric board, utility board, or a cooperative board, are those meetings subject to open meeting law?
Representative Baker.
Mr. Speaker and Representative Hansen, you know, when I served as a commissioner on the municipal board, it was open to meeting law rules. I'm a member now of the Candiway Co-op. I believe their bylaws are slightly different. What I do know is that any member is welcome to come to those board meetings when you kind of give them a call, give them a heads up, and they're always welcome to hear from you. So I look at that as being transparent. They're listening to my concerns. If I want to go to a concern, I would always know that my local members are there to hear my voice. So that's how I would interpret that, sir.
Representative Hansen.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And Representative Baker, a few years ago, we provided alternative methods for, I think, local elected officials to be able to participate in meetings by phone or I think even internet. Do the municipal utility boards or the co-ops have the ability for people to participate other than physically showing up at the meeting?
Representative Hansen, are you asking Representative Baker to yield?
Yes, Mr. Speaker, I was.
He will yield. Representative Baker.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We have 45 co-ops around the state of Minnesota. I do not know the individual rules, policies, openness to the technology levels, Representative Hansen. I couldn't answer that question for you. I don't know what that is on each level of individual decisions for each co-op.
Representative Hansen.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And Representative Baker, thanks for that answer. I'm not sure I don't know the answer to these, so that's why I'm trying to get it out into the open here. I know on the co-op that I belong to, I'm asked to nominate or vote for people to be on a nominating committee, and then the people who are on the nominating committee nominate people to be on the board of directors. And I think it's very difficult. There's usually a line that says you could write in, but is that the standard practice for most co-ops and that where you would have nominating committees and then have a board of directors where the candidates are selected by the nominating committee?
Representative Hansen, are you asking Representative Baker to yield?
Yes, Mr. Speaker. I apologize if I didn't say that.
He will yield. Representative Baker.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Again, 45 different co-ops might have 45 different processes to find the best democracy in that community. I will tell you what I know for my one co-op that I do know of, Candiway Co-op, that is their process. They look for members to volunteer to stand up to run for the board. There is a nominating committee. There's a vetting process, something that I trust in my own co-op, but I have not asked all the co-ops what they do around the state.
Representative Hansen.
And thank you, Mr. Speaker. And if Representative Baker would yield?
He will yield.
Representative Baker, out of those 45 co-ops or the municipal board, do you have any idea of the percentage of board members that are women?
Representative Baker.
Representative Speaker, Mr. Speaker, I have not that information handy.
Representative Hansen.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And if Representative Baker would yield?
He will.
Mr. Speaker and Representative Baker, looking at those boards and when they're making decisions, so you have a meeting, people come to the meeting. I had in the public official amendment that was ruled out of order, that would make board members subject to the gift ban. Is it a policy, is it a requirement of boards, of the co-op boards, or the municipal boards where they can't accept gifts, or are they silent? And maybe, Mr. Speaker, that would involve conjecture. I would say maybe just the board that you're a member on. Is there a policy of a gift ban for those boards on taking, say, whether it's even a meal or a trip to North Dakota to look at a coal manufacturing site? Is there something that prohibits that?
Representative Baker.
Mr. Speaker, again, I don't know what their specific policy is. Different co-ops may have different policies. What I do know is that I trust my local boards. I think that they work hard every day to make sure that our rates are affordable and reliable. They study the issues. I have not studied their bylaws, their rules, maybe like most of us should. But what I do know is that when I see Roger, when I see Stan, and I see Connie, who are our local board members on Candy Ojai, I can ask them those questions. They'll tell me. I haven't had a chance to do that yet, but I do know that these are people that are in my neighborhoods and I trust them. But at this point, I don't know what that answer is around the state.
Representative Hansen.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, I'll quote former President Reagan, you can trust, but you must verify. And the Public Utilities Commission was a process of verification. Having the dockets go through and having a third party review those decisions is important. We're talking about rates, we're talking about access to power, the cost of power, and we often talk about reliability and affordability. But there's a third leg on that stool, and that's resiliency. And that resiliency comes with the opportunity for providing for the customer freedom. And that freedom to choose if they want solar, the freedom to choose if they want rooftop solar, the freedom to choose to, or we used to be able to try to get some of that money back with net metering. But as power shifts, we start doing things at the state level. And I expect we're going to start doing things at the federal level, rather than leaving things at the local level where we made that decision where there could be a third party that reviews that reliability, the affordability, and the resiliency. The more distributed generation we have, the more resilient the system is. That leads to long-term affordability and reliability. I'm concerned we take these steps based on nostalgia of better times and trust. But there may be people who can't meet folks in the grocery store. There may be people who are hooked up who would like a different way of being hooked up to the system. Or maybe they want to be off that system. Or maybe they want to try entrepreneurialism, innovation, different things. And my concern with this bill is it's going to reduce that innovation. It's going to lock in a system where the old way prevails. It's a new century. There's new opportunities. I think customers, wherever they are in this state, are looking for the opportunity to try new things. I think this bill is a step backward, and I would encourage a vote against it.
Representative from Hennepin, Representative Thiessen.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And members, I stand up today to encourage you to vote for the bill. And thank you for taking that amendment, Representative Baker. Just a couple things I want to just mention about this bill. First, this is about this grid access formula at the end of the day. And, as I've looked at it closely, I actually think it's very well thought out. And it captures what it's supposed to be capturing. And captures what I think the statute asked it to capture. Now, I voted against that bill when it came through, but that's the law now, and so that's where we are. But I think there really is, this is the fundamental gist of the question in my mind. On the one hand, it's the question of should everyone, every customer of the co-op, pay for the distribution system overhead and maintenance cost equally without regard to the source of the power. The other alternative view of this is that we should give an advantage to renewable and distributed energy sources to encourage them. And I think that's what the gist of this fight ultimately is about. Should we have an equal rate that everybody pays to cover those distribution overhead costs, or should we give an advantage to renewable energy and distributed energy? And of course, I think everybody in this room knows that I voted many times to incentivize renewable energy, probably over many of your objections. But I don't think that this is the best way to incentivize those issues, by shifting the cost of maintaining and building the distribution system onto the neighbors of people that want to pursue renewable energy. More fundamentally, though, I think in this case, I'm not sure we're the best people to be making that decision. The point is, we are going to have a lot of debate over the next several months in this body about local control. We've already seen it on some of the bills that have come through committee. And for decades, we have recognized that the co-ops in this state, for the most part, and even under the law today, have the ability to set their own rates with a few limited exceptions without review by the PUC, have the right and the power to decide what sources of energy they're going to have, what distribution investments and capital investments they're going to make, all without any control of the PUC. And that is really the default position we've taken in this state for a long, long time. And as I understand it, there haven't been a huge amount of complaints over that system. So we have actually left it to these local institutions to make those decisions. What this bill does, I think, is honor that local control. And so folks that are fighting and interested in making sure that we are empowering people at the local level, I think this is a bill that you ought to be supporting. And if we believe in local control, I think that these co-ops can make those decisions and make the right decisions about what energy sources they want to choose to use and how they choose to bill their customers, because there's all kinds of ways you can go about doing that. The local folks, I think, in this situation know best. And I also want to emphasize that, and I handed out a letter, there's a lot of actually really good renewable energy and distributed energy work going on by local co-ops who have made that decision themselves to do that. Now, there are some co-ops whose decisions, I wouldn't necessarily enter into a long-term coal contract like some co-ops have done, but there's a lot of other co-ops who have actually made some very good decisions, and I think we're going to be seeing more and more of that. And I guess the last thing I want to end with, members, as I've thought about it, it's a little bigger, and I hope you'll indulge me a little bit. It's a little bit larger issue. I really think we have a serious challenge in this state, in this country, frankly, where the institutions that kind of sustain our communities and empower people to take control of their own lives are slipping away from people more and more. I think if anybody does any reflection on the last election, that is what the election was about, that people feel their power to change or control their lives is slipping away. And that's true in parts of my city in Minneapolis. There's no question about that. And I think it's true in a lot of communities across the state of Minnesota. I think one of the major jobs we need to undertake in this legislative session is to keep our eye on that issue. And the fact of the matter is, these locally elected electric co-ops, whether you agree with all the decisions they make or not, are one of those institutions that bind communities together and empower people. And so, members, I would encourage you, for all of those reasons, to support that bill. And I just want to make one more comment to the folks, on my side of most of these issues, people that really do support moving in the direction of fixing our climate and believe climate change and believe that we need to take steps toward a greener, more renewable energy portfolio. And that is, I don't think how we've been proceeding in recent years has worked. Our effort to try to say to people, we know what's best and you better do what we believe, hasn't worked. We've had a few victories. I think the 2007 RES was a big victory. But that had Governor Plenty on board when we did that. And of course, when we were in control and Representative Hortman was in charge of the Energy Committee, but we had complete control, we did pass some really good, I think, solar energy initiatives. But if you look, for example, to what's happening with the Clean Power Plan, which was one size kind of saying to everybody else, you got to do this, it's going to go away in just a few months, members. So I don't think our strategy of how we've been trying to move on climate change has worked. And I think it's because we're taking the easy way out, which is to try to impose our will when we have power. I think the hard work and the better long-term strategy is for us to go out and convince people and talk to people like we did with the marriage amendment about what is the right answer here. I think there's a lot of appetite for moving in the direction of renewable energy, for moving in the direction of distributed energy, but we have to do the hard work of having those conversations with people. And so, members, I hope that we support this bill, and I would encourage you, I guess, to support this bill. We have a lot of work to do, and I think it's time we actually take that work seriously. Thank you.
Further discussion? Further discussion? If not, the clerk will take the roll on the bill. Clerk will close the roll. There being 89 ayes and 37 nays, the bill is passed as amended and its title agreed to. Next bill on the calendar for the day is House File number 235. The clerk will report the bill.
House File number 235, number 3 on the calendar for the day, an act relating to energy, the second engrossment.
I call on the author of the bill to explain the bill. Representative O'Neill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. And I want to specifically thank a couple of the co-authors on this bill, Representative Metza and Representative Eklund. Thank you so much for supporting this and helping this come through the process. And members, this bill is basically two things. One, it implements a legislative auditor recommendation by moving the Renewable Development Fund from the private accounts of Xcel Energy into the state's accounts into a special revenue fund, an energy fund. The second thing that it does is it repeals the Made in Minnesota Solar Incentive Program. We've analyzed the last 3 years of data, and it simply just doesn't live up to the expectations. So I think we can repurpose the money and do a lot more with it. So with that, I'll stand for questions.
There is an amendment at the desk. Clerk will report the amendment.
Mahoney moves to amend House File number 235, the second engrossment, and the amendment is coded A12.
Member from Ramsey, Representative Mahoney, to-year amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. My amendment, the A12, I think it is, defines where the money from whatever form the new RDF takes to electric energy generated from solar, wind, and biomass, heat energy from solar, thermal, bioresources, solar thermal and geothermal energy efficiency in motor vehicles not powered by gasoline or diesel fuel. It requires the expenditures from this fund, these dollars, to be spent in Xcel Energy's service territory, which about 2/3 of the funds are not right now. And that was kind of part of the deal. It unraveled many years ago. It also terminates after $10 million the charge per cast. So if a cast is generated $10 million in fees, it comes off that charge. Right now, it's charging the Xcel Energy ratepayers $27 million. And very soon, it's going to get up to $40 million, which is an excess cost to the people that are served by Xcel ratepayers. Mr. Speaker, I'll stand for questions.
Discussion to the amendment. Representative O'Neill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. I would strongly encourage you to vote green on this. Representative Mahoney was kind enough to work with me on some of these provisions, and I know there was some concern as we brought this through committee, and this is the work product of coming through committee. So I'd really encourage your support on this and vote green.
The member from Hennepin, Representative Wagenius.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, members. House File 235 breaks agreements that were made with Minnesotans for the benefit of Minnesotans. There was an agreement made about 20 years ago for a renewable energy fund. That was a result of an agreement that I'm not going to tell you about because we have folks who were on the committee who made that agreement, or folks on the floor who made that agreement. We made an agreement with folks to come to Minnesota, develop businesses that provided solar, and now we're breaking that agreement. Breaking agreements is one of the reasons that our constituents are so cynical about politicians, particularly when these agreements are to the benefit of politicians, particularly this new energy fund, which is designed by politicians for politicians. This amendment actually doubles down and breaks that agreement. As I understand it, we're going to have payment termination, and it's phased out. The problem here is that 14 casks on Prairie Island already have generated the $10 million. So this means that with this amendment, Xcel's payments will immediately decline by $7 million. So folks, two agreements that are being broken. I am a no vote on this amendment.
Further discussion to the amendment. Further discussion. Hearing none, all those in favor of the amendment, please say aye. Aye. And opposed? No. The amendment is adopted. There are no further amendments at the desk. Clerk will give the bill its third reading.
Third reading, House File number 235, as amended.
Third reading as amended. Discussion to the bill. The member from Hennepin, Representative Carlson.
Mr. Speaker, members, I survived Prairie Island. That's in reference to a button that was distributed at the height of the conference committee that I was a part of back in 1994. Representative Wagenius mentioned that there were some of us on the floor that were here then, and there are two of us on the floor that were a part of the conference committee that met to deal with Prairie Island. But I want to give you a little bit of background, and I mentioned many of these things in Ways and Means the other day. But I'm going to begin with the the appointment process, because I think that lets you know how difficult it was to reach that compromise. At the time, I was on two conference committees. I chaired the Education Committee, and I was on the K-12 Conference Committee and the Higher Ed Conference Committee when I got a note from the Speaker of the House at the time that he wanted to talk to me about conference committee. So I assumed he wanted an update on the two conference committees that I was on. So I got up to the Speaker's desk, and the Speaker said, Lynn, I'm thinking of putting you on the, what was called NSP at the time, the NSP Prairie Island Conference Committee. And so I said, well, Mr. Speaker, I have not been involved with the issue. And he said, well, I'm going to appoint two conferees that favor the NSP position on nuclear storage. And I'm going to appoint two conferees that will be taking the opposite position, that are opposed to any storage at Prairie Island. And he said, you will be, in essence, the swing vote. Now, I was not the chair of the conference committee, but quite frankly, in many respects, I ended up being the de facto chair, because as the swing vote, I was heavily involved in the negotiations, probably more so than the chair from the House side was. I said to the Speaker when he told me what the makeup of the conference committee would be, I said, well, what kind of an outcome do you want? And he said, there are two things. He said, I want you there to reach a compromise. And he said, I don't want any storage in Koochiching County. Now, the Speaker at the time represented Koochiching County. He was from International Falls. And actually, there's a lot of granite up there. There was probably a reason why he said it, although there was never a proposal to move nuclear waste from Prairie Island to Koochiching County. But the real charge was to try to work out a compromise. So I said, well, Mr. Speaker, let me think about that. So I left, and I got down to about, where Representative Pulowski is sitting, right down here in front. Announcement by the Speaker. He announced the conference committee. So I'd had about 2 seconds, I think, to think about whether I would be on that conference committee or not. I think it's fair to say he had already made his mind when he made up his mind when he called me up there. But at any rate, my life changed for the rest of that legislative session, believe me. Right after I was appointed, I was walking down the hall in the Capitol, and there were two men walking behind me, and I turned and I sort of lightheartedly said, are you following me? And they said, yes, we're with Capitol Security. We've been assigned to you, and we need to meet with you in the morning and talk about some of the security. Now, the chair on the Senate side had actually received some threats. I was just appointed. I hadn't received any threats, nor did I ever receive any threats from people on either side. But it was an extremely emotional period of time. And so when I met with the people in the morning, they gave me a special route in and out of the chambers. I was to go upstairs and around and come around down on 3rd floor. And you could see the demonstrators down below. It was just packed with people on both sides of the issue. There were also at that point in time TV and radio ads for both sides of the issue being run. So it was extremely high profile, extremely emotional, and it was our charge, the 10 of us, to find a compromise. There was one other little tidbit I would tell. By the way, we met all night, many nights, and one night it was about 4:35 in the morning, and I turned onto the street. I live on a quiet residential street. Red lights went on, and I thought, oh, what have I done? And a police officer comes over to the car, and he said, how are things going in St. Paul? And I said, well, okay, we ran late, but I said, why did you stop me? Or what did I do wrong? Something like that. And he said nothing. He said, we've been notified by the folks in St. Paul. I don't know if that was Highway Patrol or Capitol Security. They're under the same jurisdiction at any rate. That if we could drop by your house a little more frequently in case demonstrators or there were any threatening things that happened. And in the meantime, Capital Security said, do your children live at home yet? And I said, well, my daughter is going to University of Minnesota Morris. My 2 sons are living at home. And so I was advised to tell them that if any demonstrators showed up or they felt threatened, to just go in the house, not to challenge them, but to call 911. So I'm only telling you this to kind of let you know what the background on this whole issue was and the high degree of emotionalism. And as I mentioned earlier, the chair on the Senate side actually did receive threats. That's why they were dealing with the precaution. And to this day, I've really never asked Representative Houtsman if she was assigned security or not. But at any rate, over several days, long night meetings, into the wee hours of the morning, we came up with a compromise. And the compromise had a few key elements in it. One was that we put a mandate in place that 450 megawatts of wind energy be developed, and the conversation was about Buffalo Ridge in southwest Minnesota. And we always refer to it as wind energy. I think in the case of Buffalo Ridge, so you understand what that is. In fact, I asked the question, I said, what happens if there's no wind? And they said, well, Buffalo Ridge has a natural, it's kind of like a jet stream, a natural upwind of, or uplift of the air. So the wind or the uplift is constant. And they said, in fact, the problem is the opposite. If we get too much wind, then we have to turn the generators back to the wind. So that's why the early development was at Buffalo Ridge, but 450 megawatts. Also in that compromise was a requirement that they do 50 megawatts of biomass. So you might ask, well, where did that 500 megawatts number come from? That equaled 1 reactor at Prairie Island. Each of those reactors produces 500 megawatts. So that was the number that we used. And then the other thing that we did to reach the compromise, because this was, I can't tell you how difficult it was to get the 10 people to agree to a compromise on that issue. And it was an idea that I worked on rather extensively as part of that compromise. I was involved with all of it, but that there would be a fee charged for each cask. That's where the rods are stored, of $500,000 per cask per year. And that fund then was to be used to develop alternative forms of energy. And I think it's worked quite well through the years. We've raised significant sums of money. There have been a couple of unfortunate situations when the state had budget difficulties. From my perspective, the fund was raided for other purposes. But for the thrust of the bill, it was about $150 million that remained available. There's $28 million available today yet in the fund. You might hear different numbers thrown around. And of course, later then with Monticello, a fee was charged of $350,000 for each cask, but that came about, if I recall correctly, a little bit later. So basically, renewable energy and research was the purpose, is the purpose of the fund. And really that put Minnesota in the lead. Really nationally, we were among the earliest states to really develop in a big way alternative forms of energy. Now, the next major development, I'm told, for those of you from northwestern Minnesota, is going to be the development of turbines and wind energy between the Fargo area, Moorhead on our side of the river, and Grand Forks, maybe even all the way to the border. I hope that that development takes place on the Minnesota side, because there's another thing that I think is important for people to remember. During that conference committee, people from farm country, the farmers in the legislature, were almost literally looking over my shoulder. They were so interested in this because of the economic development. And you know, each of those turbines are very expensive, on into the millions of dollars. And that creates income on some of those farms. Some of the farmers have formed, we just talked about co-ops, cooperatives to build some of those wind generating facilities. It really put us at the cutting edge, literally, and it also provided economic development, especially in southwest Minnesota at the time, and I think there's potential for northwestern Minnesota as well. So, Mr. Speaker, I'm going to stop there and wish that, or hope that people will give some serious thought as to whether you want to change the role of the Renewable Energy Fund. It does break, as Representative Wagenius pointed out, a compromise, and a very important compromise that was extremely difficult to reach. And by the way, I didn't expect, I thought once we were done and the bill passed that I was done with the issue. And here I am 23 years later talking about the events that took place one day that set the course for the rest of the legislative session for me in a very major way. But I think Minnesota can be proud of what we did relative to the development of alternative energy. And that's an important thing to remember. We're breaking that compromise if this bill passes into law.
Further discussion? The member from Hennepin, Representative Wagenius.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. If anybody wanted a chance to kill off solar, you've got it right now. You can vote for this bill. When we were in committee, Representative O'Neill argued that the conversion of the Renewable Energy Fund, taking away the word renewable and making it into an energy fund, was just a course correction, not the breaking of a long and closely held agreement. So without the renewable restriction in here, which has kept the money intact for over 20 years, the money you are earmarking now is just general fund money. It can go for roads and bridges, and maybe some folks are going to grab it within the next year. If the RDF fund were no longer restricted to promoting renewable energy according to the original agreement, XL could argue rightly that they should stop paying into the fund. And here we go. That's exactly what the amendment did. Minnesota has made a really good start down the road to creating renewable energy and renewable energy jobs. This bill is more than a roadblock. This bill is pulling the construction workers right off the job. Representative Hausman put out a letter that I think everybody should look at closely, because these are the people who are working in Minnesota right now. Look at the first paragraph. They're writing in opposition, and then they say this legislation, if enacted, will not only kill an important component of Minnesota's solar industry, it will also pull the rug out on solar businesses that have made investments and finalized contracts for solar projects this year. Turn on the back of the letter and read the next to the last paragraph. How can these companies recoup the investments that they have already made? How can Minnesota expect to continue to compete nationally in this fast-growing sector if we repeal this program and tell our solar business community we've changed our minds? Look at the list of businesses that are being impacted by this. We had testimony from Bill Grant, and I think there's a flyer in here about that. That's 495 jobs created by Made in Minnesota. And what you're doing is saying to those people, that's it, that's the end. The generating capacity of solar in Minnesota was next to nothing in 2007 when we passed the Renewable Energy Standard. In 2015, it was more than 25 megawatts and is projected to have reached 250 megawatts in 2016. Since 2014, Made in Minnesota has funded over 1,000 projects for 15 megawatts of generating energy. There are now 4 solar manufacturers in Minnesota. And as I said before, the Department of Commerce estimates that Made in Minnesota has created 495 jobs that you're taking away from people, with an additional over 1,000, almost 1,500 jobs projected by 2023. These are good jobs. They pay around $71,000 a year. The statewide average for all jobs is $51,000. Overall, Minnesota workers in the clean energy economy earn more than $1 billion in wages in 2013. And you want to pull the rug out from under them? One of the other things that Bill Grant said in our committee was that without Made in Minnesota, we wouldn't have a market for rooftop solar, nor would we have the jobs that it created. Solar installers ask for a sunset rather than an abrupt end to the Made in Minnesota program. They can see the cost of solar dropping. It's not quite there yet, but there is a time that Made in Minnesota is not going to be needed. A sunset and a phase out could be negotiated, but that's not what's happening here. Manufacturers, installers, and most importantly, citizens have not been at the table. They need to be at the table. I urge a no vote.
Further discussion? Member from Ramsey, Representative Clark.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to maybe expand a bit on what Representative Carlson talked about a little bit earlier, the process. And I did have passed out a letter that comes from the Prairie Island Indian community, and it's signed by the Tribal Council President. And I would just like to call your attention to what this is about and why this, if nothing else, should give you great pause to vote for this bill. This was a very difficult time when the original bill establishing the Renewable Development Fund was created. It was a very emotional time. It was a very difficult time. People were very upset, and there was incredible fear, and as Representative Carlson described, even personal threats that happened. The people who really helped make this be what it is today is the Prairie Island Indian community. We will be breaking another agreement with American Indian people here in Minnesota if this bill passes. And we have broken every treaty, every agreement that we've ever made with American Indian people here in Minnesota. That's a fact. And this is another one. Though it's not a treaty, it was an agreement, and it serves the whole state well. Why were they involved? Well, as we know, Prairie Island is located on an island in the Mississippi River. In itself, an incredible fact that a nuclear power plant is located on an island in the Mississippi River, and it happens to be, you know, the homeland for the Prairie Indian community. And as the council president says in this letter, it's only several hundred yards away from where the people live, breathe the air, have their gardens, live their lives. They have been very generous in working with us on this. They serve on the advisory committee. They have had a small voice, at least, in deciding what particular use the Renewable Development Fund would go to. And that should not go away. I did talk with Representative O'Neill earlier to find out what sort of discussion with him might have happened, and I want to give her credit for indicating that she has had some conversations with them. And then she asked me to look at the Mahoney Amendment, and I did, and it does do what I was fearing that it would do, which is it will wipe out that fund, because after several years, when they reached $10 million per cast, the fund is discontinued. So Representative O'Neill, I did look at that, and that's what I see, and that is breaking the agreement. Those casts are going to be there, and they were part of the promise we made to try to deal with the fact that our federal government has never created a national repository for high-level nuclear waste. So members, I ask you to really think about this. Please read the letter that the Council President puts before us. She reminds us, again, please remember the origins of this Renewable Development Fund. She said it was a condition of storing spent nuclear fuel in dry cask. It was meant to reduce the states dependent on nuclear energy. That was a lot of the reason it was such a controversial discussion. It had that purpose. And through this advisory board, to keep safe impacted parties involved. So I just urge members, we need to vote against this bill. It destroys an agreement with our Native American people in a way that is unforgivable. Please vote no.
The member from Ramsey, Representative Mahoney.
Members, the reason I put this amendment on is the RDF fund has collected over $300 million from Xcel Energy ratepayers. And part of the deal, other than the 534 megawatts of wind power, which costs about $50 million, was that money was supposed to be spent in Xcel Energy ratepayers area. So out of the possible $250 million that was supposed to be spent in Xcel Energy's ratepayers area, they have spent $74 million. We're all smart people, you can do the math. Xcel ratepayers have gotten the short end of this stick. This deal was broken years and years and years ago. This year, or next year I should say, it's scheduled to be $27 million. And if this amendment passes and those casts come off, $7 million, $6.5 million, depends on the time. This fund will still have $20 million in it every year. Every year. If this doesn't pass, it'll be $40 million pretty soon. And it doesn't end in several years. These power plants don't close down till the year 2036. About 19 years from now. And the CAS will pay for 20 years beyond that. So this agreement, the way this amendment is written, ends the CAS payments in the year 2056. 2056, almost 40 years from now. So it's not several years. It's an unvoted on tax on Xcel ratepayers that this deal was broken. This money was supposed to be spent in that area, whether it was for wind energy, solar energy, or anything else. So members, there's been a lot of things said here, but remember, out of $300 million, $74 million has been spent where it was supposed to be spent. The casts don't get done paying for themselves or that charge for those casts for almost 40 years. There's more to be said, but I think I've said what I needed to say here, members. I'm planning on voting for this.
Member from Hennepin, Representative Carlson.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, when I was making comments earlier, I referenced the fund, and I think something that has to be understood. We all lived through what was known as the Great Recession and a lot of the budget problems that the state of Minnesota had. So when you hear that $300 million was collected, but not all of that was spent on research, money was taken from the fund, unfortunately, to help balance the state budget. And I think it's important that people understand that. And I don't have the numbers before me as to how much was taken at that point in time, but it greatly reduced the fund. And it's my understanding that the real number that was available for research was $150 million, as I said earlier, and there's $28 million still sitting in the fund. So I don't want people to get confused when you hear $300 million and think that somehow it was the work on alternative energy that created the problem. It was the state budget crisis we had and the movement of dollars out of the fund into the general fund to meet other needs at the time.
Member from St. Louis, Representative Metsa.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. It's hard to admit when you're wrong sometimes, and I'm going to speak specifically to the Made in Minnesota portion of this bill. When Representative Moline, who was the chief author of this, carried it, our intent was to create a manufacturing industry where we laminated panels here in the state and had, good things going versus just assembly of parts. And to keep this short, after debating a lot of bills tonight, what this ended up being was a bill that promoted essentially having Chinese, Taiwanese solar panels shipped into the state, a few nuts and bolts get put on them, and that was considered made in Minnesota solar. The intent when we offered this was different. I was in regular contact with the Commissioner of Commerce and the Governor's office and stated our concern. And essentially, we have now a bill that is not truly promoting made in Minnesota the way that an Iron Ranger would think about it. And I know we'll have hopefully a great transportation bill this year where we can talk about made in U.S. steel to support President Trump's agenda to have Buy American products. But today, I'm here talking about admitting when you're wrong and moving on to do something that is better. And out of respect to my colleague, Representative Mahoney, who I know had some issues with his ratepayers doing this, I would just ask that you respectfully consider voting yes today on that portion of the bill, because it was a lot of money going outside the XL rate service territory, and it's pretty disappointing to hear that only $74 million has benefited those ratepayers. Please vote green.
Any further discussion? The member from Wright, Representative O'Neill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. I just want to correct a couple things that were said. First of all, it's the money going from the XL Energy RDF would go into a special revenue fund, not a slush fund, not a general fund. This is a special revenue fund, and thank you, Representative Mahoney, for putting guardrails around this. It can only be spent on those 5 categories that he listed. So it's not going to be spent on roads and bridges or anything else. This is specific to develop additional renewable energy for the most part, and energy conservation, which I know people keep talking about Germany. And so when I went to Germany, one thing that was incredibly interesting about the energy policy in Germany is that when they're trying to move forward to get to 80% renewable, and I did say 80% renewable, 49% of their plan is in energy consumption reduction. So they're going to try to use less energy. So 49% of their plan moving forward is to reduce their consumption. And so I appreciate, Representative Mahoney, that you put that in there about energy efficiency. Something else I think that's really, really important to know is that to look at the picture of where we are today. So we now, XL Energy just did new RFPs. And the RFPs came back at between 2 and 2.5 cents per kilowatt for wind. Wind is cheaper than anything else right now, and that's amazing. We have come so far since 1994 or 1999 when the money started going into the RDF. Also, their solar RPFs were 5 to 5.5 cents per kilowatt, which is lower than nuclear. It's basically on par with coal. So we have come so far, and literally in this last RFP procurement, they're getting wind at 2 to 2.5 cents and solar at 5 to 5.5 cents. That's remarkable. Look how far we've come. We should celebrate that. It is time to make a shift and maybe use this money for something broader than what it had been used for before, like additional energy consumption reduction, energy efficiencies, energy storage, some other things that were not listed before. But again, all for using energy uses. And how can we use energy better and more efficiently, cleaner, cheaper? That's what we want to do. So that's what this bill does. It offers more transparency, because if that money's sitting in Xcel Energy's accounts, we actually had to go to them to get the information as to what was in it and what were the transactions. We've never done that way. There's only one other time in state history that I believe we've done that, according to the research I've done, and that was with Clearway, and it was very small amounts. And the other thing I need to correct is actually Representative Mahoney. It was $370 million. $370 million has been taken from Xcel Energy ratepayers. That's a lot of money. And I appreciate the fact that you did the calculations of how far into the future that these payments will continue. So I really ask for your support today, and I thank you, Representative Mahoney and Representative Metsa, specifically for working with me on this bill.
Seeing no further discussion, the clerk will take the roll on the bill. The clerk will close the roll. There being 76 ayes and 49 nays, the bill is passed as amended and its title agreed to. Report from the Committee on Rules and Legislative Administration.
Peppin from the Committee on Rules and Legislative Administration, pursuant to Rules 1.21 and 3.33, designates the following bill to be placed on the calendar for the day for Monday, February 13th, 2017, and establishes a pre-filing requirement for amendments offered to the following bill. House File Number 375.
Motions and resolutions. There are copies of the non-controversial motions at the House desk and online. If there's no objection, we'll take action on these motions first. Hearing no objection, the motions prevail. The member from Ramsey, Representative Moran. For what purpose do you rise?
Yes, Speaker of the House. Point of personal privilege.
State your point of personal privilege.
I would like to do, in the spirit of Black History Month, I would like the opportunity to rise to honor the late Coretta Scott King. Coretta Scott King, born April the 27, 1927, was an American author, activist, civil rights leader, and the wife of the late Martin Luther King Jr., who I know we all know about. But today, this is all about Coretta Scott King. Coretta Scott King helped lead the African American civil rights movement in the 1960s. King was an active advocate for African American equality. Coretta Scott King, met her husband while in college, and their participation escalated until they became central to the movement. In her early life, Coretta was an accomplished singer, and she often incorporated music into her civil rights work. Coretta played a prominent role in the years after her husband's 1968 assassination, when she took on the leadership of the struggle of racial equality herself and became active in the women's movement and the LGBTQ right movement. King founded the King Center, Coretta King founded the King Center and sought to make Martin Luther King's birthday a national holiday. Coretta finally succeeded when Ronald Reagan signed legislation which established Martin Luther King Day. She later broadened her scope to include both opposition to apartheid and advocacy for the LGBTQ rights. Coretta became friends with many politicians before and after Martin Luther King's death. Most noticeable was her relationship with John F. Kennedy, Lyndon B. Johnson, and Robert F. Kennedy. John F. Kennedy's phone call to her during the 1960 elections was what she liked to believe was behind his victory. In August of 2005, Coretta King suffered a stroke, which paralyzed her right side and left her unable to speak. 5 months later, she died of respiratory failure due to complications of ovarian cancer. Her funeral was attended by some 10,000 people, including 4 of our 5 living U.S. presidents. She was temporarily buried on the grounds of the King Center until being interred next to her husband. She was inducted into the Alabama Women's Hall of Fame and was the first African American to lie in the state of the Georgia State Capitol. Loretta has been referred to as the First Lady of the Civil Rights Movement. So it is true that Coretta Scott King dedicated her life to fighting 3 great evils: racism, poverty, and war. As such, she is known as a champion for children, women, families, and the working poor, and an early supporter of the LGBTQ equality. Senator Warren was silenced early this week on the Senate floor for speaking the words of Coretta King. In honor of the great woman who stood up for the rights for all, I would like to share some final words from Coretta Scott King. And she said, "It doesn't matter how strong your opinions are. If you don't use your power for positive change, you are indeed part of the problem. Freedom and justice cannot be parceled out in pieces to suit political convenience. I don't believe you can stand for freedom for one group of people and deny it to others. We must eliminate the gulf of mistrust and ignorance to keep us from learning from each other. We have a lot more to do in our common struggle against bigotry and discrimination. All we seek is an America where every person is given the chance to be productively contributors to this country and where they can receive a fair and equal share of the wealth that production creates. Thank you for this moment.
There are additional motions at the desk. The clerk will report the motions.
Swedzinski moves that House File Number 379 be recalled from the Committee on Education, Innovation Policy and be re-referred to the Committee on Education, Finance.
Recognize the member from Lyon, Representative Swedzinski, to introduce your motion.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, this bill is kind of a cleanup bill from last year that deals with paraprofessional licensing and education. And I've talked to both the chairs, and they are both comfortable with this move. So thank you. I'd appreciate your support.
Any discussion on the Swedzinski motion? Seeing no discussion, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. The motion prevails.
Anderson S. move that House File Number 778 be recalled from the Committee on State Government Finance and be re-referred to the Committee on Government Operations and Elections Policy.
Recognize the member from Hennepin, Representative Anderson, to introduce your motion.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is moving a bill that I have authored from the committee that I chair to the Government Operations Committee. It's dealing with the stadium issue.
Any discussion on the Anderson motion? Seeing no discussion, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. The motion prevails. Announcements. Recognize the member from Hennepin, Representative Pepin.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move that when the House adjourns today, it adjourns until 12:15 p.m. on Monday, February 13th, 2017.
Representative Pepin moves that when the House adjourns today, it adjourns until 12:15 p.m. on Monday, February 13th, 2017. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. The motion prevails. The member from Hennepin, Representative Pepin.
I move that the House do now adjourn.
Representative Pepin moves that the House do now adjourn. All those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. The motion prevails, and the House stands adjourned until 12:15 p.m. on Monday, February 13th, 2017.